Welcome, everyone. I am Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and thanks for joining us this Tuesday morning when I always talk with Edwin Eisendrath for a talk about what's going on in the world and right here at home. Edwin, of course, is host of It's the Democracy Stupid right here on Lincoln Square. You can see that on Friday afternoons. He also hosts a weekly radio show on Heartland Signal that you can find if you're in Chicago or anytime online. And Edwin also writes his own Substack, which you should subscribe to as well. Thanks so much for being here, Edwin.
Well, thanks, Susan. It was an adventure. As those of you who join us every week can see, I'm not in my usual spot. I got caught and unable to get back to my home and my studio there in time. So you have to make do with this makeshift arrangement and a phone. I apologize to everybody.
Yeah, bear with us. We're in the Midwest and it's thunderstorm season. I know, Edwin, you had some tornadoes sweep through Chicago. My internet has been down for the last day, so
Yep.
we're winging it here. But we're Midwest tough, so we can deal with -30 weather. We can deal with thunderstorms. So
You bet. Here we
we're
are.
we're here to talk about what's going on, and why don't we start with I thought a pretty disturbing story that came out over the weekend about the Pentagon undercounting casualties in the Iran war. There were a couple different ways that they were doing this. They left off the last 4 deaths because they said, "Oh, that was a different Iran war than the original one, so let's not count it with the other 14 people who died." But then they also undercounted about 140 casualties. And so now the total is over 600. And, this is a war where we've never gotten a straight answer what the objectives are, where we are demonstrably worse off than we were before the war because the Strait of Hormuz has been constantly closed by Iran, and we have had this loss of life of our troops. But they're not really they're not making their case for why we should trust them on information when they're playing games on something as important as how many troops have been killed and injured. And this is another break, Edwin, I think, than we've seen with previous administrations who have often run wars very poorly. Let's be clear, but lying about people who have gotten hurt in combat, that's a different level.
I almost, your point that they've mismanaged this war, that we are, I guess if this is the second Iran war, we're losing two, Trump will have lost 2 wars to Iran rather than just one. But the cruelty of telling the families of soldiers who were killed in battle, hey, they don't count, that wasn't a war, um, uh, is unconscionable in every way and absolutely par for the course in an administration where the president of the United States simply believes that he is the only human being on the planet that matters, and everybody else is there for his pleasure or his use, and uh, so dehumanizing people, whether they are soldiers who were they signed up to defend our country and to protect our freedoms, and they're being sent around first to Venezuela to go to war for the oil companies, and then to the Middle East to go to war for we don't know what because the president won't tell us, right? But it's not our freedom, and they're dying there doing their job, doing what's expected of them, and now he's saying they don't count. I mean, it's vile and par for the course. And, he's doing it with our men and women in arms. He's um, uh, doing it with migrants to this country, and anybody else that gets picked up in their dragnets. They're being brought to these terrible gulags, where they're not being treated for their illnesses, where they're being caged with lots of people. They're zip tying children. It's just a cruel, cruel administration. And it is that way because we have a president who is a sick man. He's a sick man. He is the only person that matters, and everybody else is an instrument. And I can't imagine why people want to work in that administration. They want to be his tools, but apparently they still do. And that's why we have to beat them so badly that they can't get back up.
I think one of the lowest points of this war that's had so many of them was at the last dignified transfer, where Trump was literally putting words in the mouths of dead soldiers and saying basically their dying breath was Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Repeating the propaganda from this administration and trying to attribute it to soldiers where there was no evidence that any of them had said that. But he took a time where any other president would center the fact that these people died in service to the war that he started, let the families have their peace. But no, Donald Trump had to make it all about them and to lie on top of it.
Yes, he did. And that's who he is. I mean, you think about the letters that Abraham Lincoln wrote to the families who survived the loss of their young husbands and sons and brothers in the Civil War. And he wrote with compassion and gratitude, right, for what they did and acknowledgement of the terrible loss. And Donald Trump didn't get there and say, they did this wonderful thing for our country, and I'm so sorry for their families. He said, they think like I think, and therefore I'm right. That's and there's no evidence, by the way, that any of them ever said that. None.
Right.
Um, uh, it's just another example of what we all suffer when we have a president who is a pathological liar and a man who doesn't see the humanity of anyone.
Right. So over the weekend, we did not see strikes in Iran, for the first time in a couple of weeks since this re-escalation. We do know that oil prices are going up. Gas is averaging about $4.11 a gallon. It's gone up again. The midterms are right around the corner. And we do know that Trump and Republicans are very concerned about the impact of the war on Republicans' chances this fall. But just seems to be a quagmire that he does not have the political skill to get out of, which is why we've been sucked back in. And Edwin,
Susan,
yeah,
hang on. I'm not sure anybody has the skill to fix this. Some problems you cause, and they have real consequences. And this is a problem like that. He caused this problem. The consequences are very real. And the most skilled politicians and the most skilled presidents, the most skilled secretaries of defense, no one in this administration, but the best that we've ever had, would find that America is going to be worse off because of these decisions. There are consequences, and America has been harmed and badly harmed by this. And one we aren't talking about much, but if you read the oil industry news, which for fun I looked at this week, stockpiles around the world, the strategic oil preserve, right here and in China and elsewhere, they've been drawn down a lot. And we could get not to a place where prices go up a little bit, but where they go up a lot, where we really have a crisis. And that would cause an economic catastrophe that will last a long time. These are real possibilities that are there because of the choices, the terrible choices this awful president has made. And he's now faced with no good choices. And he's, of course, incapable of making the best of this terrible mess. We will all suffer for it for a long time. It doesn't mean that we won't get out of it and begin a path of healing. But I think we have to understand that this isn't a news cycle issue. He has changed the world for the worse for the United States. And that is a persistent, long-term problem that this terrible president has brought upon all of us.
But of course, he doesn't have an excellent team behind him. Even though he's created a situation, as you pointed out, where perhaps the best negotiators don't have a good hand to play, but certainly his team of corrupt narcissists and misfits are not the right people for the job. The Pentagon, led by a former Fox News host, Fox and Friends host, Pete Hegseth, who doesn't do briefings anymore as the war has not been going well. He's got Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who has myriad business interests in the Middle East, and others leading this peace effort. And of course, J.D. Vance, who is way in over his head. So there's no way that we're going to negotiate a good deal here.
Well, we aren't
especially
negotiating, Susan. We
right.
are not negotiating. No one is negotiating for the United States. These people are negotiating for themselves. They are going there and cutting deals for themselves. They are standing in the place of our country and saying, we're the ones who benefit. We'll send our soldiers to die. We will try and make deals then on that mess that benefit us personally. And the us in that isn't you and me. It isn't the American people. It's Jared Kushner. It's the Trump family. It's the Witkoff kids. All of them, they got their secret not secret now, tungsten deal that the U.S. negotiated for them. For them. It's unheard of. It's illegal. There's an emoluments clause about this in the Constitution. The president is in violation of it says a president can't do it. Doesn't say what the consequences are, but the president is doing it, so the Constitution doesn't matter. Now, of course, the remedy to that is in Congress, but the Republicans in Congress are complicit. They are complicit.
Right. So Trump's partner in crime for this Iran war, Bibi Netanyahu, will be coming to the U.S. I believe it's his 7th visit during Trump's second term. He's coming in at a point where Netanyahu has made it clear that he does not want to see peace in Iran. He has opened up a front in Lebanon, taken advantage of the situation. And of course, as we've talked about many times, he's facing his own issues back at home where there have been mass protests for years against him and his corruption. He knows that the only way that he can stay in power is for Israel to be in a perpetual state of war, whether it's in Gaza or Lebanon or Iran. So, Edwin, what are you expecting from this visit?
Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. These two men no longer trust each other. They need each other. They are in the same boat and angry with each other about being in the same boat. Serves them both right, but it's terrible for the world. Again, Bibi has made Israel less safe and more isolated than it's ever been in its history. And at the and if you just look a little bit in either direction, he's also murdered people all over around that, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, well beyond what the defense of Israel called for. Undoubtedly war crimes, maybe genocide. I don't know, but certainly war crimes, clear war crimes. And it's encouraged by Donald Trump. They're just people they say we hate and they should be dead. And I mean, and it isn't just, adversaries who are armed around the world. You think about when Robert Mueller died, an American hero, really, a great public servant. And the president of the United States, his response was, I'm glad he's dead. Yeah. He talked about him like he talked about Iranian terrorists who have been killed, who says, they died like dogs, I'm glad they're dead, right? He doesn't make a distinction. His enemies are his enemies. And Bibi is the same way. They dehumanize everybody. The consequences are deadly for far too many human beings. And they've made Israel a pariah nation, and that is a real danger for that country. And they are making the United States far from, we're back and bestriding the world. The world does not believe Donald Trump. The world doesn't respect Donald Trump. The world is afraid of our weapons, but we're rapidly working our way through that stockpile. And instead, they think, America's in the hands of a madman. And increasingly, they're willing to say it.
Who do you think has been more of a disaster for their own country, Bibi or Trump?
Bibi, but he's been there longer. You know,
Mm,
uh, I mean, the United States is a much bigger nation. It's much harder to threaten. Israel is threatened, and Bibi has made it less safe. I mean, Israel's in a more precarious spot to begin with than the United States, and and Bibi's short-term judgment has left it long-term more vulnerable than I think it's ever been. Um,
mhm.
uh, uh, I continue to believe that we will throw out the Republicans in November, and Donald and we'll take back the presidency in 2 more years, and we will begin the long road of repair, and that repair includes holding these people accountable for what they've done.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they'll get to that in Israel.
Yeah. I mean, he has done so much damage to their democratic process where
Yeah,
he has
yeah.
defanged the Supreme Court. Elections have been postponed. I mean, he's really been very successful in solidifying his own power, protecting he and his wife from mass corruption charges. And, I, looking at the state of Israel today, it is difficult to see what rebuilding that democracy would really look like after so many years of Netanyahu in power.
Well, they're creative people, and if they get the chance, I think they will surprise us all. But they're going to have a lot of work to do, and they're going to have an enormous amount of work to do with the both their neighbors and all of us around the world who care about human rights and care about human dignity. And look, it's tough. I mean, Hamas still says that there should never be a state of Israel. We want to run it over and be done with it, and they want to stay there. And so it's problematic. It's always been difficult in that part of the world, but you cannot. There have to be people who are peacemakers.
Hmm.
You don't get anywhere just blowing people up. You end up making the world a terrible place, and it is unconscionable morally to do it. You have to be a peacemaker, and um, Israel's had peacemakers in times in its past. They needed to find it again, and its neighbors need to find peacemakers as well. And I believe they're out there. I mean, I've certainly talked to them. I used to work in that part of the world, and I've worked
Right.
in all the countries around Israel, and I worked in Ramallah. So I've
Mhm.
I've spent a lot of time there. There are people who long for peace, and want to be done with this. But Iran and to some extent the United States, as long as you keep pouring arms in there and saying people, you know, we're going to make you stronger than the other guy, just keep fighting. Well, then people keep fighting.
Yeah. Edwin, you mentioned that you're still optimistic about Democrats winning in November. Obviously, Donald Trump and Republicans are willing to do whatever it takes so that doesn't happen. And Donald Trump is still waging war within his own party over the SAVE Act, which, we know is the biggest voter suppression bill that we've ever seen, and there have been many that have passed, both especially at the state level in many red states. But Donald Trump seems to have declared all-out war on Senate Majority Leader John Thune. He, has been tweeting about him constantly, ordering him that the Senate can't go on recess until the SAVE Act is passed. The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump does not have the votes, even with a Republican Senate. He doesn't have the 60 votes, and there is not the desire to nuke the filibuster there. But let's talk about what this bill would do, because it's been out of the headlines for a while, but it's no less damaging. I mean, this is not a voter ID bill. This is a show us your papers to vote bill, either your passport, which half of Americans don't have, or your birth certificate, where many people, especially married women, don't have documents that match their current ID. And so this could be a massive way to disenfranchise people, including many Republicans, trying to make it difficult to vote, throw chaos into our elections. And Edwin, really, that's the point of all this. Whatever way that they can sow doubt and increase Republicans' chances of maintaining the House and the Senate. That's the goal here, right?
Yeah. So let me start with, you began by saying I'm still optimistic that we will win in November. I want to amend that to say I am even more optimistic that we will win in November than I have been. Um, um, in part because there is nothing this administration is going to do between now and then to make itself more popular. It's hell bent on making itself less popular in every way, in everything it does, because its chickens are coming home to roost. The decisions they've made are harmful. We all said they would be harmful, and the harm is here, and people are feeling it. They're feeling it, whether it's when they eat a bag of lettuce, they're feeling it whether they get measles, they're feeling it when they because prices are up everywhere because of his tariffs and his war. They're feeling it because we're 6 months into a war that we now appear to have lost twice, right? There are all kinds of reasons why we're feeling it. So he is hell-bent on saying we can't have elections that are free and fair. The SAVE Act is all of the things that you say. It is a voter suppression bill, and it is an election chaos bill. Absolutely right. Also this week, he went back to the Supreme Court and said, I did an executive order that says I can tell the Postal Service not to deliver the ballots of people who in my view, shouldn't vote. And he thinks the Supreme Court's going to say yes to that. And God knows, I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do because they've stunned me with their horrible decisions. We are going to have to win an election that's not free and not fair. We have a federal government, a very powerful executive branch that is determined that we will not have free and fair elections. And you know what? They have a lot of power, but they don't have all the power, and elections aren't run by the federal government. So
Yeah.
I'm confident that just as the Hungarian people won an election that wasn't free and wasn't fair, we are going to have to win an election where he's got his fat hand on the scale. We're just going to have to win by showing up, by working harder, by protecting each other's rights to vote, by double, triple checking that you're registered everywhere, and by figuring out where to cast your ballot, where it'll be counted and counted on time. And we have to do that work everywhere. Um, that brings me to a slightly different topic and it's related, so forgive me. But there are all kinds of arguments that say the Democratic Party is in disarray. And it points to the fact that the DNC, it's got no money, it's got debt, and doesn't know what to do, and it's got a staff of 11, right? The Democratic Party is not the Republican Party, never has been. It's a bottoms-up party. So let me just reassure people who are seeing those headlines everywhere, every day, that they're bullshit.
The DNC has always been a shit show. Okay.
And it's never important for us, right? They have a job, but the party, candidates are raising money, no problem. In state after state, we are doing what we need to do to protect the vote. This Democratic Party comes from the bottom up. It's not, we don't want a boss telling us how to think. We're not like the Republicans, so we can never be organized like we have a CEO and his huge office at the top telling everybody else how to behave. That's their party. That's not ours. We're not in disarray that
The
way.
mainstream media, one of their favorite storylines is Dems in disarray. It's why
Yes.
people make fun of it online on social media all the time. And so right now they're like, oh, see, the establishment, the progressives are fighting. That's why the DNC is a mess. That really has nothing to do with it. The DNC is always a mess. There's always, disagreements over how they should run things. And the stories go one way or the other. Either the DNC is this all-powerful entity that it determines primaries and keeps out good progressive candidates, or it's completely feckless and they're going to lose everything. In reality, the DNC just really isn't all that important for what Democrats are doing on the ground.
Right.
I'm much
Totally right.
what candidates are doing. I'm really, really happy to see what happened in Maine over the weekend. Look, Maine was a disaster.
Fabulous.
Okay. Graham Plantner, in my opinion, never should have been the nominee. That was the choice of Maine Democrats. They decided after the one last allegation against him to broom him from the stage. I was glad to see it. But instead of spending time fighting each other and having everybody hate each other, they coalesced around Troy Jackson, who seems to have the support of a lot of different factions. He's a former Republican. He's been a former Senate president. He has progressive credentials. Seems to be a decent guy, which
Lumberjack, right?
yeah, being
Yeah.
a decent guy, I think, is more important than we estimate. Because who wants to end up with another John Fetterman? Who wants to end up with another Graham Plantner? Character does count. Sorry, and so, but Maine came together. They're willing to coalesce around a candidate to fight Susan Collins, and that's what we all have to do. I know these primaries are getting heated. I'm here in Michigan. The president was just here trying to rally the troops. We've got a really intense US Senate primary here. But you know what? Everybody who is arguing with each other like it's a blood sport, everybody agrees on 95 to 99% of things. And the most important thing should be to keep that Senate seat so we can get to a majority in November.
Right. So I mean, that's why I wanted to, the question you asked was like, Donald Trump is pushing the SAVE Act. And all of that's true. And at the same time, Americans are being told the Democrats can't fight back because we're feckless. It's just wrong. It's just absolutely, as you're pointing out, the DNC is never the body that fights back. It's candidates in every state. It's election workers in every state. This is local. We are organized. We are actually raising money and not having too much trouble doing it. The money's not going to the DNC. That's okay with us. It's going to state parties. It's going to candidates. It's going to support election work. It's going to litigation, which we need because they're going to cheat. Then, strike that. They are already cheating. And we see it in purges from voter rolls that have already happened in some states. So there is no question that the federal government is in the hands of the federal government is Donald Trump, courtesy of the Supreme Court. That's what they said. That's what a unitary executive is. We have no independent agencies except the Fed. Makes no sense, but that's what they said. That's the law of the land in America. So Donald Trump's government is taking on American elections because Americans don't want him to have that power. And you know what? Americans are going to win.
Yeah. And I was really happy to see, I look at what the generic ballot was, and the generic ballot for Democrats was slipping for a while. There have been some new polls that show, huge margins, which is great. We're going to need it, especially with the Supreme Court and what they did with the Voting Rights Act and allowing racial gerrymandering on top of all the political gerrymandering that Donald Trump ordered starting with Texas last year. So we're going to need all the enthusiasm that we can get. And, I mentioned that Donald Trump was in my home state yesterday, who is rallying for Congressman John James, who's running for governor. And this is what we're fighting against. We've got some footage.
They have this term. So here I am. I'm one day in office, and the fake news goes, affordability, affordability. I said, what's affordability? What's that all about?
He's mocking the idea that people cannot afford things in his America, which, by the way, was his number one promise on the 2024 campaign trail. I'm going to lower prices on day one. I'm going to give you a better economy than Joe Biden did. And now he makes fun of the idea of people not being able to afford things.
It's not just he's making fun, he's lying, right? First off, he was talking about things not being affordable, about inflation before the election. Right. So it didn't just show up on day one of his administration. It was a campaign issue through his election. And then on day one, I'm sorry, nobody was saying affordability. They were saying, what do you mean you're pardoning everybody for January 6th?
Right.
So that wasn't what happened on day one. That's a lie. But later on, as his policies made things worse every minute. And by the way, Democrats were shell shocked on the first few days of his administration. We really weren't saying that much. We were trying to figure out how is possible we lost to this terrible man again, right?
Right.
But once we found our footing and found that he'd imposed tariffs and were raising prices all over the world, then we said, you know what? We really want to talk to you about how unaffordable it is in America because of your decisions. And now he's backdating it and lying and mocking it because he does not care that Americans are having trouble. Because guess who's not having trouble? Him and his family, right? Lining the pockets. And by the way, I don't just want to blame them. There will be a reckoning for corporate America who's paying the bribes. Because it isn't, because I mean, a lot of the money he just stole from his supporters with his meme coin, for sure. But a lot of it is also corporate bribery that he has put out a sign and said, please, I'm for sale. But somebody's got to say it's okay to pay the price. So I think there's a lot of accountability coming.
Yeah.
And I think once we see the midterms results, corporate America is going to look up and go, "Holy shit! I'm going to be liable for bribing the president." And they're going to, for the next 2 years, that spigot's probably going to shut down a little bit, and that'll be fun to watch.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about one of those companies, Taylor Farms, which is at the heart of this Cyclospora outbreak that has now affected 41 states, where literally you're scared to go eat salad in Trump's America. And there's been really great reporting from outlets like Wired and others about DOGE cuts that have meant that it's been harder for us to get good information and early reporting and for them to actually track down what's happening. And then there's the other story about how the company at the center of all of this has been extremely generous to Donald Trump and MAGA PACs and had a White House meeting as all of this was going on. And so nobody deserves the benefit of the doubt here. We have RFK Jr. that doesn't care about anything but trying to make sure that nobody has access to vaccines and doing TikTok videos, as Jennifer Schulze wrote for us today, which in a great column you should all read.
Everybody read this piece. It's a great piece.
Yes,
Great.
it goes through exactly what a shit show all of this has been. We haven't gotten good information, but the silver lining that she points out, and I think is important, is there really has been some very good news reporting at the local level, at the national level about this outbreak. First, to try and keep people safe and get them good information that we no longer can count on from our federal government, but also going through and doing that kind of accountability journalism about what DOGE and what HHS has done under RFK Jr. to make us less safe.
Yeah, I mean, as she points out, we used to be able to count on our federal government and our taxes paid for a government that would inspect the food chain for us, that would assure the safety of our food for us, that if there was an outbreak, would catch it early and contain it, that if you got sick, gave you good information about how to get better. Right? Our government does none of these things anymore. Now, I don't know if anybody's gotten a tax rebate because we're no longer paying for these good services. Oh, wait, you did if you're a billionaire. But if you're not, you're still paying for services you're not getting from your government.
Yes.
And we're not getting them. And therefore, we are more likely to get sick. Things that normally got inspected aren't being inspected. And when you get ill, good luck finding out what the right thing to do is, because these geniuses in RFK's office are going to sell you some quack medicine. They're going to tell you, ivermectin cures that too, right? I mean, you cannot count on your government anymore, even though you're still paying them taxes. Crazy, right. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah. And of course, he's overseen many other crises as well, like measles cases have hit a 35-year high. That's not a coincidence. If you go on the official government website, try and look for information on vaccines. Now the federal government will tell you, actually, all of those many peer-reviewed studies that have been out for decades, they've shown that there is no link between vaccines and autism. Don't believe them. Believe what our quack Health and Human Services secretary says instead. And one day he's going to find that link, just like OJ was going to find the real killer. Sorry, that's a data sequence,
he doesn't. he is as unfit and dangerous for that job as Pete Hegseth is for running our military. People die because of their incompetence. People die because their stupid ideology matters to them more than facts. It matters to them more uh, than the consequences. They would rather have us die for their crazy ideology than have the facts keep us safe. And
Right.
that is just so antithetical to
Mhm.
I was going to say the best in the way America's governed itself for 250 years, but it's antithetical to the way best or worst that we've governed ourselves for 250 years. We have never had an administration that's this ideologically motivated.
Yeah.
I
We
can't
saw
think of
this.
one.
Yeah, we saw this during COVID, Edwin, and it really disturbed me then, where you would see in states that were governed by Republicans that they were putting out misinformation about the pandemic. They were anti-mask, anti-vax. Thousands of people died who did not need to. And those deaths were not, it wasn't just, oh, a bunch of Democrats will die, we don't care. Democrats died, Republicans died, people died, which is the most important salient part of all this. But they were willing to sacrifice their own voters to spread misinformation on some sort of a weird power trip. And that's really the MO of this entire administration. They don't care if they're killing their own voters, with anything from measles to COVID to explosive diarrhea, as long as they keep their weird people in charge, like RFK Jr. And that's a disturbing place to be. Just like they're willing to disenfranchise their own Republican voters for the SAVE Act if it can help them cheat just a little bit better. It's not about the common good, and they don't even care about the people who vote for them. And that's why I think Trump has managed to lose even some core Republican support. Even some diehard Republican voters are willing to vote for Democrats, as even if they don't agree with them on a lot of things in November, because they just want to send a message. Enough. I am poorer under Trump. I'm sicker under Trump, and I don't want to do this anymore.
And I'm embarrassed under Trump. I'm embarrassed that Iran, a third-rate power, has kicked our ass in the Middle East. I'm embarrassed that we went to war and made things worse. I'm embarrassed that the president tore down the White House, a chunk of the White House. I'm embarrassed by that thing that was empty, that was supposed to be the celebration of the 4th of July for our 250th birthday. Everything the man touches is embarrassing. And then he gets out there and gives these rambling, crazy speeches where he mocks everybody and everything and holds nothing sacred. He goes to the White House Correspondents' Dinner last week, which should never happen, by the way, this way, and mocks the reporters in the room, and stands in front of them all and lies like he usually does about stuff. It's just embarrassing. And Americans are sick of being embarrassed. You know what? We're a proud country. We want to be proud. We want to think that we are and we can be a remarkable force for good in the world, a remarkable force for good for our own people. And under this terrible administration, things are getting worse for us and for everybody else in the world, and it's just embarrassing. He's an embarrassment.
He is. But
Yeah.
we do have our
And we've
chance.
decided. We look, Susan, we're also law-abiding, peaceful people. I mean, they have done everything they can to push us to civil unrest, right? And we haven't gone there. Our protests have been peaceful. But they keep arresting us in those protests and saying, oh, we're violent. Oh, we're ramming them with cars. And then they get to court and they say, oh, we don't really have that evidence. I'm sorry. We made it up to get the indictment. They've weaponized the Justice Department that way. Oh, yeah. I mean, Comey is about to be set free, right? Because 8647 isn't exactly a threat to the president. They indict people for nothing. They indict people, as we found out with a Broadview 6, with lies, and then they have to walk it all back. Americans are sick of that. Republicans, Democrats, everybody, they're sick of it. Jeanine Pirro trying to indict anybody who puts their hand in the reflecting pool, only to find, you know what, they don't really have any of the witnesses she said she had when she made the indictment, lying once again. So,
Right.
I like, we just don't. This isn't who we are. We elected this man. He was elected. I mean, I'm not an election denier, but he isn't the man that people thought they were electing, and
No.
he has not taken what he's done with our government is not legitimate, just not legitimate. Not he's not doing the job of a president.
Right. And we have our chance to make our mark in November and show up
Mm.
in greater numbers than they can cheat and send the message that this isn't who we are. We don't like what Donald Trump has done as president. And hopefully we can elect folks who are willing to hold him accountable on day one, because that's what this country deserves.
Oh, we deserve so much better than we have. We deserve to hold them accountable. We deserve laws that don't just take the entire wealth of this continent and give it to a few cronies of his. You know, we deserve an economy that benefits the people who work hard every day here. Um, and we have had that in parts of our history, and we can have it again. We don't have to go backwards. We can go forwards to get it because they're different solutions. I mean, I think about the data centers, again, the people who are putting them all over the country, they didn't bother to say to us, here's why this technology is going to benefit you. Here's what you're going to get out of it. This is why this is important. What they said is, we have the power. You're helpless. To hell with you. We don't care what you think. We're putting this here. And
Mhm.
and this is what Donald Trump and his group of billionaires think about the rest of us in America. You don't deserve to know. You don't deserve to know why we're going to war. You don't deserve to know why we're taking your water and raising your electricity rates so that we can make more money on something. Maybe it'll benefit you, but that's a side thing. It really benefits us, and you don't have a say in it. And you know what? In a democracy, you do have a say. And
Yeah. I thought
we're proving everywhere we have a say. And they don't get to, they may think we don't, but they're wrong. And we're going to prove them wrong.
I thought it was really telling that last week Donald Trump was talking about data centers, and he was like, you just have to accept it. You can't protest. You just have to take it, basically. And that's really his philosophy on so many things, because he doesn't consider himself a president. He considers himself somebody who rules over us, but that's not the way things work in America. We're not willing to roll over for him or for data centers or, for the Republican Party and
Or
for
for his
their
arch. Yeah.
for arch, for ICE
Ball
killing
rub.
people in the street, for
Yep.
his war that's illegal and he's never gotten congressional approval for. And I am very optimistic that in November we will send that message, and it will be a very powerful one.
He's about to have the 2 worst years of his life.
Good. He deserves it. It couldn't happen to a nicer person.
No, could not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, Edwin, let's end on a high note. And please, everybody, tune in to Edwin's show. It's the Democracy Stupid. It's on Fridays right here in Lincoln Square in the afternoon. You don't want to miss that. And Edwin, thank you.
And I promise Friday not to join you from a phone that's leaning on a book in a makeshift place. I promise better than this.
Thank you. Thank you, Edwin. And thanks to all of you for joining us.
Thank you, Susan.